Hello, I'm Joshua from Authentic Aquatics, and as always, wishing you and your aquariums the best. Today I decided I was going to talk about quarantine tanks because I had touched briefly on them when I did a how to set up marine fish and live rock aquarium, but you really need to know about them because a lot of people don't use them, and it actually can save you a lot of money if you do, saves you a lot of effort, and just keeps your whole system safer for your fish. Quarantine tanks are really easy to set up. All you need is an aquarium appropriately sized to the fish that you're putting in. Say you already bought a full-grown tang. Well, you obviously can't just stick a full-grown tang in a 10-gallon for a few days and say, okay, everything's going to be fine, because it's going to produce too much waste. And really, with a quarantine tank, you don't have that biologic filtration that you do in your main tank. So it's going to cause a lot of problems. And no matter what you do, every quarantine tank needs to be cleaned. And I do 10 to 20% every other day. That's a great, it keeps all the nitrates down, your ammonia, everything. Just make sure you clean it off a little bit. And that way your fish is healthy as he goes through quarantine, because this is stressful, and the stress brings out any diseases or any parasites that he might have. His immune system weakens and he can't fight those off anymore. So you really want to keep your quarantine tank in good quality. Then after a few weeks that you've noticed, okay, he's doing fine, I don't see anything wrong with him, then you can throw him into your main tank. Once you picked out a decent sized aquarium, you know, for clownfish or damsels, I'd say even 5 gallons if you're only going to keep it in for 2 weeks. Just make sure you keep up on those water changes so that the levels don't go too high. Right here I have my black Ocellaris in there, and really I've been doing water changes. I had a few days I did them back to back. I had 10% one day, 10% another day, or I'd do 20, wait a day, 20 more. You know, it was really just making sure that it was keeping clean, because I didn't want to lose the clownfish in the process. And I've been checking it, I've been testing all my nitrates, and they've been staying low, and all my ammonia, everything. So what you don't want to do in a quarantine tank, you don't want to set up a biological filter. And the reason why is if it gets sick, you have to kill all the bacteria that you're building in that tank. So I mean, there's no reason to go with sand or some substrate like that, because you're just going to kill whatever's living in it. If it has ick, you got to use a copper treatment or a formaldehyde treatment. You got to use something, and that's going to just completely destroy any bacteria in that tank that's beneficial. So what you want to do is keep it really basic. You don't want to put a lot of money in your quarantine system, because really all you need is your heater. You need some type of aeration. It could be a hang-on filter that's just sort of running. You don't use the carbon in it, or you put something just to strain some of the food that's been eaten. All I use is an air pump, and that gets the water moving a little bit. Gotta have a good powered light. And what I did was I actually didn't buy a light for the tank. I went with a very high powered lamp that I keep here in the house for reading, and then I put it against this whole wall right here is all mirrors. So you have that really nice light reflection, and it's probably as decent as the aquarium lights that you can buy. And so I decided, you know, for 5-gallon aquariums, it's kind of hard to find lights that fit that. So I said, you know what, and use this, and he's been doing fine ever since. I have actually kept a fish in quarantine as long as 6 weeks, but that's, you know, that was for an extreme case that it was having really bad ick, so I killed the ick. But I had already set it in the aquarium before, so the aquarium had ick. And what happens is when you have ick is it's got to flow through the system, and eventually, you know, ick's a parasite. Ick is not a disease, which most people think. A lot of people, you know, they'll come on commenting, oh yeah, well ick is a disease, it's a sickness. No, it's caused by protozoan, and what they're doing is they attach to the fish and they begin to feed off of it, which in the wild isn't a problem. In the wild, you know, it sends off, one little bud sends off hundreds of little protozoan, and they find only one in a few hundred find a host. And so that one lives on that fish. The fish barely even knows it's there because it's such a fast process, falls off and explodes again. So in the wild it doesn't kill anything because there's not enough feeding on one fish. But here, when you get in the systems, it's really easy for those protozoan to find a fish. So what happens is you have one fish with ick, and one of his pops, one of the white spots that we're all so afraid of. That white spot pops, that sends a bunch of protozoan. That's when you kill them. And what you can use is, I don't have any on me now, but there's a product called Riddick. I'd used it for clownfish in the past. It's done really well. And what happens is you're trying to kill them before they get back onto the fish and do that again, because it stresses the fish out. But if your fish is already stress-free, like mine has been, he hasn't had a single spot on him, but he probably has seen ick in the past. He just wasn't stressed out enough that his immune system let one of those bugs onto him. So nothing butted on him, and there you have it. So stress is a key factor in quarantine tanks. And so a lot of people tell you, don't set up a quarantine tank, just going to stress the fish out. Well, really, if you have a well-going quarantine tank, acclimating a fish to anything is going to stress him out. Acclimating to your display tank, you're stressing him out. Acclimating him to the quarantine tank, he's going to be stressed because you're fidgeting with him. So what I would do is go ahead, set up a quarantine tank, set up a small one, just get used to it. And that way, if you have a disease in here, just take out Mardel 2, your Riddick, if treating fin rot or treating ick, and you just throw the prescribed dose in, and then you do your water changes as normal. Probably run that a week or two depending on the treatment, and voila, you haven't killed your biological filter. Not always saying you're going to save the fish, that's always the problem, but you're avoiding getting the other fish in your aquarium sick. And that's why quarantine tanks are so helpful. And it's sad because only about 5% of all hobbyists use a quarantine tank for their saltwater systems. So, you're really running on numbers here. And the ones that have quarantine tanks, they tend to report lower, whenever they have an outbreak, it always tends to do less damage in the main tank because it's something that's been controlled through a quarantine tank, so it's sort of been reduced. The amount of that it can do is not as good, and the chance of it getting into the main tank and not showing up in the quarantine tank is very low. That chance is almost absent. So I don't know why you wouldn't use a quarantine tank. I think it's a very wise decision to use one, but that's up to you to decide.